You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Good morning, I'm Fred Childers. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. Well, this week, Attorney General Jeff Landry announced he is looking to put restrictions on books children have access to in public libraries, but some fear the suggestions are targeting the LGBTQ community. Capitol reporter Shannon Hecht brings us the details of Landry's report.
Joining the national tide of criticism for certain books on library shelves, Attorney General Jeff Landry is calling for libraries to create new policies that restrict children from accessing books he calls sexually explicit.
Nowhere in this report do we call for the censoring or banning of books. This is about what's appropriate for children.
Two state legislators are filing bills that create a mandate for the changes to children's access. If libraries don't follow suit, it could cost them funding.
We don't want that 10-year-old walking into a library with that full access card and be able to check out something like a Penthouse magazine.
One member of the Louisiana Library Association, who asked to remain anonymous, says the state's libraries do not have pornography on its shelves. He also says based on the report, the books recommended to be pulled have mostly LGBTQ themes.
That population is absolutely being targeted.
He says most of the books on the list are in the adults or young adult section of the library, not the children's area.
Libraries absolutely 100% support parental rights. A parent has absolute sovereignty and absolute right to decide what their child reads and does not read. Where we have a problem is that they do not have the right to tell another parent what their child has access to.
LGBTQ advocates say that they are in support of keeping non-age appropriate books away from children, but fear that this law could lead to more materials being removed or limited in public libraries.
I just find that really troubling and hope that we can have a more honest discussion in the legislature about what this is actually about.
Now, the legislation filed this week will be introduced into the regular legislative session that is set to begin on April 10th. A state lawmaker faces a lawsuit for blocking someone on social media. An abortion rights advocate filed a federal lawsuit against State Senator Katrina Jackson this week. She had been blocked from posting on Jackson's Twitter account. Now, the suit seeks acknowledgement that her First Amendment right to free speech had been violated and a court order to restore her posting ability. The suit claims that as a public official, Jackson is beholden to maintain a public space on her account. You might recall Jackson, a Democrat, authored legislation to make abortion illegal in the state. After New Orleans saw an uptick in car break-ins during sporting events, one state representative is proposing a law she hopes will deter burglars. Shannon Hecht caught up with the lawmaker to hear what her plan is to address this issue.
After numerous reports of car break-ins in the New Orleans area, Representative Lori Schlegel of Metairie is looking to increase the punishment.
People are taking advantage of very vulnerable situations.
It also has the same punishment if someone is caught committing a string of simple burglaries, such as hitting several cars on the same street.
A lot of these burglaries are happening while people are sleeping. And then also when, people are at events and there's just massive amounts of parked cars. I just think that sort of deserves an enhancement in the penalty when it comes to burglary.
Rep. Schlegel says that she hears from people who are afraid to go into the city, and it could have major impact on the events there.
People aren't wanting to go. The sentiment is there. People are not feeling safe. And our economy is around tourism.
The most common rebuttal to bills in the past that look to increase punishments is that it does not actually deter people from committing crimes and leads to just putting more people in prison. But Schlegel says there needs to be some sort of relief.
We know we have to do something, and I'm a big believer in things aren't mutually exclusive. I do believe in holding people accountable is not mutually exclusive to actually caring enough about people that they're successful.
The bill will be up for debate in the regular legislative session that starts on April 10th.
Advocates for sexual abuse survivors shared what their priorities are heading into the next legislative session. Star advocates say while it is an election year and a fiscal session, they will support slightly different legislation than normal. They want to take a more proactive approach and support legislation that can fund things that can get people out of abusive situations. Star CEO Morgan Lamondre says some examples are housing, equal pay, and child care.
What does prevent sexual assault and what the CDC has posted in their Stop Sexual Violence Technical Package is that access to paid family leave, access to pay equity, a lot of these other social justice issues that you see happening, that, quality childcare access, these are all things that in the grand scheme of things help to prevent sexual assault.
Lamondre says that STAR will also be looking into supporting exceptions to the abortion ban for rape and incest. Louisiana's Insurance Incentive Fund bill has been signed into law by Governor John Bel Edwards. The law creates a $45 million fund of state surplus money to entice insurance companies to write policies in the state. About 10 companies have already expressed interest in applying. In return, the companies must remain active for at least 5 years or give back the money. They will also be required to write half of their new policies in the high-risk parishes. The insurance commissioner is hopeful it will lead to more competition and lowering premium rates. The Louisiana Department of Transportation has announced a new $150 million mega grant for upgrades to the Calcasieu River Bridge in Lake Charles. Dawson D'Amico has an update on the years-long project.
The Interstate 10 Calcasieu River Bridge in Lake Charles has stood tall for over 70 years. And with the new multi-million-dollar grant coming their way, the necessary upgrades will be made to ensure more stability for the future.
A new bridge will not just be good for Southwest Louisiana, not just for Louisiana, but for the nation as a whole.
The Calcasieu River Bridge was built in the 1950s and has been a key part of transportation and development along the entire Interstate 10 passageway. With the help of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act being passed in November of 2021, this project is looking to bring in many jobs and benefits to the Lake Charles area.
This bridge project is going to lead to over 16,000 jobs. And companies are going to be required to submit plans for training and hiring from the local community, making sure underserved populations get included in that opportunity.
The replacement of the bridge is projected to meet the highest standards, which are currently not being met.
That new bridge is going to be wider, with 6 lanes, shoulders, a less steep approach, improved on-ramps. And over the lifespan of that new bridge, it's estimated to save people about 115 million hours in travel time.
Currently, there is no date set to begin upgrades to the Calcasieu River Bridge, but DOTD ensures a decision will be made by the end of 2023. In Lake Charles, Dawson D'Amico, KLFY, News 10.
A familiar name in Louisiana is appearing on a ballot soon. Monique Blanco-Boulay, a Republican from Lafayette, told supporters in a written statement she's running for Lafayette Parish Mayor-President. Blanco-Boulay, the daughter of former Governor Kathleen Blanco, says as the CEO of the Acadiana Planning Commission for several years, she brought more than $200 million in new infrastructure and business investments to her community. The general election for Lafayette Parish Mayor-President will be held on October 14th, 2023. Well, some parts of the state are back to pre-pandemic level employment, and we'll have an update to the effort to recall New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell. That's next. Stay with us.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. The creators of the petition to recall New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell found themselves in court this week over not wanting to release the names of signers to the press. LBJ brings us the details of what the local newspaper was after.
Last Thursday, the Times-Picayune filed a petition for writ of mandamus against recall organizer Eileen Carter, hoping to force Carter to release the names, addresses, and signatures of each elector that signed a petition to recall the mayor. WGNO legal analyst Cliff Cardone says that state law favors the Picayune.
The law is quite clear and unambiguous that they are entitled to that information. So the only defense that the custodian of the records, which would be Eileen Carter, has would be that there'd be some type of irreparable harm. But she's probably going to have to show that harm in advance.
Over the weekend, the recall campaign released a statement saying that they would not release the names and asking the question, is this in the best interest of the community when this administration is known to retaliate?
She's going to probably have to show that there is some harm, a retaliation or reprisal that's been made already against a voter, and produce that information at the hearing. Then perhaps a judge could craft some sort of relief that would protect the voting public from full disclosure.
We reached out to the Times-Picayune, and their editor, Renee Sanchez, sent us this statement saying they have no intention of mass publishing the names on the recall and, quote, we believe it's in the public interest to know whether public officials are part of the recall movement or not. It's also in the public interest to know where generally in the city the recall is strong or not. The hearing is Wednesday at Civil District Court, and Cardone warns this may not be the end of this case.
The judge can do whatever she wants. The question is whether or not the other side, who's on the opposite end of that finding or ruling, wants to appeal it.
For WGNO News, I'm LBJ.
The Times-Picayune and NoLatoya.org recall group reached a settlement and agreed to release the names of those who signed the recall petition. NoLatoya.org organizers must do so by February 22nd, the same day the names are submitted to the Secretary of State and Registrar's Office. February 22nd is the final day of that recall. An East Baton Rouge Metro Council member is calling for a report on the effectiveness of police chases. Councilman Cleve Dunn Jr. is asking for a report that shows how many people have been killed or injured during police chases. This comes after a police chase killed 2 cheerleaders on New Year's Eve. Data will come from the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office and the Baton Rouge Police Department over the last 10 years. It will also include the financial liability of the city parish.
They clearly wasn't prepared to give the report, so I'm going to bring the item back again and make sure they have all the data that we requested. We've seen it here locally, we've seen it around the country. So I wanted to open up the conversation with our law enforcement officials so we can look at policy, evaluate what we're doing, and try to reduce that risk for our citizens.
The council members also questioned about the cost of pursuits to taxpayers and suggested that policy changes need to be made. Also in Baton Rouge, the capital city has recovered from all job losses during the pandemic. That's according to the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. The chamber also says the economy is back up and running. One economics expert says we're seeing more jobs now than ever before.
400 more manufacturing jobs across the capital region than we did in 2020. Other industries like leisure and hospitality have grown a lot by 2,500 jobs. Education and healthcare has grown more than any sector over the past 3 years to the tune of about 4,400 new jobs in that sector alone.
Brack says Louisiana still has a low unemployment rate at 3%, but there are still more jobs than people searching for employment. Anyone looking to give a guided tour of Louisiana's swamps better have the proper licensing, as the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries is cracking down on the practice. Britt LaFaso reports.
This past year in 2022, we were really cracking down on it.
Sergeant Michael Lee Bear with the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries says people who advertise themselves as a hunting or fishing guide for compensation need to have a basic hunting or fishing license and a guide license. Agents, however, are catching more and more people in Acadiana and across the states giving guided tours without one.
We were getting complaints of people taking clients out to go duck hunting, hunt geese, woodcock, doves, whatever it is, and they did not have any type of hunting guide license.
It's a new requirement only a few years old. In 2021, agents gave warnings during an educational period. Now, hunting or fishing guides without the proper license will face hefty fines and citations.
Not only because it is the right thing to do, but we have these set in place to help with our ecosystem out there to be able to manage these resources. That way we know how many ducks are being taken every year, how many fish are being taken every year. Those monies that these people provide that goes into the funding helps with conservation and rebuilding back our ecosystem and the wildlife and fisheries and the resources of this state.
Sergeant Hebert also says the guided license is a requirement, but also a privilege.
It's a privilege to go out there and enjoy the resources of the state, to be able to hunt, to be able to fish, and there's a small price that you have to pay to be able to go do those things.
Britt LaFaso reporting. Coming up, Senator Bill Cassidy makes another attempt on Capitol Hill to bring revenue to Louisiana from offshore energy production. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is your local election headquarters.
Welcome back. One Louisiana senator is working to bring in more revenue from offshore energy production to the state. After legislation caught a snag in Congress last year, there's hope it'll get support across the aisle. Capitol reporter Shannon Hecht brings us the details of the RISE Act.
Senator Bill Cassidy is focused on amending the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act to bring in more revenue to Louisiana. Right now, 4 Gulf states share in 37.5% of the royalties from energy production off their coasts. There is a cap of $375 million total that the states can split. Cassidy's bill aims to remove that cap.
It's going to be a priority in this Congress. Louisiana has learned to use money from offshore energy production to rebuild our coastlines to protect our communities. We hope to get this done so that Louisiana can be a model to other coastal states.
Also, under Cassidy's bill, he wants to add wind production to the revenue stream, which would greatly increase those dollars. Under the Louisiana Constitution, the money brought in from the Go Mesa deal must be used for the coastal restoration and protections. State leaders and local municipalities across South Louisiana are in favor of the move to bring in that extra revenue and advance more protection projects. This bill was brought in the last Congress and passed the Senate, but was caught up in the House.
Unfortunately, bad politics got in the way and prevented it from being signed into law last Congress.
Cassidy hopes it will have bipartisan support again this year and will be officially filing the bill this week. For your local election headquarters, I'm Shannon Hecht.
After nearly 4 years of fighting for police accountability, Mona Hardin, the mother of Ronald Green, hoped the State of the Union address showed how serious the problem of police violence has become across the country. Congressman Troy Carter invited Hardin to be his guest at the State of the Union. Her attorney, Ron Haley, said that fighting for justice is now her life's work, and she shows up to everything on the subject, no matter how big or how small it is.
And she just was elated and appreciative to be able to represent not only just Ronnie at the State of the Union, but there have been a lot of families that have been affected by police violence throughout this state. And she feels that it's her calling to represent those families as well.
Also invited to the State of the Union was East Baton Rouge Detective Will Bankston. Senator Bill Cassidy invited him after he rescued a driver whose car was thrown from a bridge about 2 weeks ago. You see it there in the video. Detective Bankston reportedly went into the water to save the driver who was trapped and drowning. In the State of the Union address, the president faced a divided Congress for the first time in his term. He highlighted the economy's bounce back from the pandemic, strong job numbers, and the unemployment rate of 3.4%, the lowest since 1969. He also called for bipartisan support of gun and police reform bills and sought to reassure Americans worried about the ongoing war with Ukraine and growing tensions with China. Meanwhile, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana had this to say about the president's address.
The president tonight talked about how sound, in his opinion, the American economy is under his watch. President Biden wants you to believe that hamburger costs $4 a pound, a whole chicken costs $8, and your 401k is crashing because the economy is so good. It's just not true, folks. President Biden has been pushing on a door that is clearly marked pull.
Kennedy went on to say he believes the American people and Louisiana residents deserve better. Up next, we'll have a look at the week ahead on your local election headquarters. Stay with us.
This is your local election headquarters.
Looking ahead to the coming week, on Monday, State Representative Scott McKnight will be speaking at the Baton Rouge Press Club about his run for treasurer. On Tuesday, Study Commission on Deterring Sex Offenses Against Children will be taking testimony at the Capitol. Wednesday, DOTD Secretary Sean Wilson will be presenting to the Electric Vehicle Task Force. Then on Friday, the final executive budget for the governor will be unveiled, and of course we'll be covering that. Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Fred Childers. Stay informed. I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.